everybody. My name is Graham McNicoll. I'm the co-founder of GrowthBook. GrowthBook is the most popular open source A/B testing and feature flagging platform. And we're huge ClickHouse fans. Went through Y Combinator back in 2022. So my talk today is on enterprise A/B testing with ClickHouse in particular. And we're going to go over really briefly like what A/B testing is and why you should be doing it. And then we're going to take a look at like what do I mean by enterprise-grade experimentation, because I think that might be a bit of a surprise for you guys. And then how you can easily do that with ClickHouse and GrowthBook as well. And I'm going to tempt the demo gods and do a big live demo of like setting up the entire thing. So we'll see how that goes. And then we use ClickHouse internally at GrowthBook for a lot of real-time feature flags, performance data. And if I have time, I can show that, but we'll see how it goes. Does anyone not familiar with A/B testing? Everyone knows exactly what it is? OK, cool. So we're going to fly through this part. The definition I like is a controlled way of measuring the impact of a change on real users. But I think the bigger question is, why do you A/B test? And to answer that question, it's sort of important to understand that like the impacts of the products that we ship is non-obvious. Like everyone every day is building features to help make their products better. And it turns out we're actually not great at that, at figuring out which ones are not that are going to improve. So by way of example, this is an A/B test taken from Airbnb. So this is their host page. So they were testing, the version on the left is the control version, and on the right is the new variant. And they're trying to increase the sign-up rate for becoming a host by kind of giving you more details about how much money you could make. So by show of hands, who thinks the new version improved the sign-up rate? Does anyone think it hurt sign-up rate? OK, well, people are pretty good got there. That one actually lost. So this comes from a website called goodui.org that tracks a lot of A/B tests that are found in the wild. Here's another one from Netflix. So this is their main login page. And the same here, the version on the left is the control, version on the right is the new variant. And they're testing adding enter your email address next to the call to action. So you have to enter your email address before you can proceed. So who thinks the new variant improved performance? And who thinks it hurt performance? Oh, interesting. That was actually a winner. Yeah, so my takeaway here is that like, things are non-obvious, right? We're all trying to produce the best products, but we actually fail a lot. So the actual success rate of changes we make to products is only about 1/3 of the time, right? So this is even with our best efforts of building exactly what we think the customers want. We're just not great at it. And so that means about 2/3 of the products you ship are actually unsuccessful in moving the metrics with which they're intended to move, right? And that's an awful lot of time spent on products that don't work if you're not measuring which ones are working, which ones are not working. It's actually kind of worse than that because the more optimized your product is, the lower your success rate will become over time. So this is some of the success rates from the industry. You can see there's usually industry standards around 15 to 30%. Cool. And so you might be asking like, well, we don't need to A/B test because we kind of look at the data. Well, it turns out that it is really hard to tell causal impact of a change when you just kind of look at aggregate performance. So this is a graph taken from Airbnb where if you just looked at the raw data, you would say, OK, it's generally up and to the right. Maybe we should launch that feature. But because they ran it as an A/B test, they were able to tell discretely like what the impact of that actual change was and then roll it back because this was a losing test. Cool. So the takeaway here is that without A/B testing, you're really guessing at what's working. And so let's quickly take a look at like the mechanics of an A/B test. So there's a couple different parts of it. Usually you just come up with a hypothesis, like what do you want to test? You then randomly assign your audience into one or more groups. You then serve those groups the different experience, the treatment groups, the treatments, and then you then track how they do on your product. And then use statistics to figure out what the impact of that was, whether or not it was statistically significant or not. OK, so that's how you do experimentation. But like, what do we mean by enterprise grade, right? So typically how companies start experimenting is they'll start like at this sort of really basics, what we call like crawl stage, where you just maybe just added event tracking, you're starting to look at aggregate performance. You might start moving a little bit more advanced, now you're kind of walking. So you're starting to optimize some parts of your product, maybe you run a couple A/B tests here and there, maybe you're doing just the important parts of your product. Companies get to where there's like a common experimentation, so the run phase, where they might be testing hundreds of tests a year, maybe a little bit higher than that. And they have like growth teams in-house to kind of optimize parts of their product. But the really cool thing is you get to this extra stage where like what we call ubiquitous experimentation, right? Where like A/B testing is the default to how you launch a product. And every single change is an A/B test. And this is where some of the companies like your Microsofts and LinkedIn's and Netflix are. And they're actually running hundreds of thousands of tests a year, like down to the pixel. So you might imagine that like when you're running 5 tests, the product that you build and how you scale it is entirely different than the product you build for 100,000 tests, right? That's an enormous amount of data. Some of our customers have sort of eye-wateringly large tables, and it can be tricky to get it to kind of work. But what we typically see is that if you were to plot experimentation sophistication with like the company size, you end up with like this graph where you kind of need to be a large company to figure out how to get really sophisticated and do that enterprise-grade experimentation. And all of these companies up here kind of self-build their own tools in-house because it's so hard and so expensive. Most of them. Some of them kind of fall off a little bit. Yeah, and so our goal here, and the goal with ClickHouse, is to kind of bend that curve so that you can get like really sophisticated enterprise-grade experimentation without requiring much effort at all. In fact, I'm going to try to show it to you in like 5 minutes. Cool. All right, so what are some of the things you need to get to that level of enterprise-grade experimentation? Well, you have to have a platform that can make self-service, right? You have to have your entire team be able to run tests without one team or one person being like the bottleneck there. You have to bring the incremental cost per experiment as close to 0 as possible. Because if you're running 100,000 tests and you're paying per test, you're going to probably go broke. Particularly if you're like, some of the other platforms get very, very expensive, and that's one of the reasons why people self-build. Most companies, when they reach a certain sophistication, also have their own custom metrics in-house. And if your A/B testing platform is having you use like just clicks, that may not actually translate to actual real performance. So a lot of the companies will build their platform so that they can use their own data. And finally, like the scale to your event volume. If you're Netflix, that's a pretty big number. The really cool news is that like ClickHouse is great at this. Like it scales tremendously well, so well that you can actually just like pipe raw event data in there without really needing to do pre-aggregation, and then just like query it real time and get some really cool results out of it. And so a lot of the hard work of like having data teams, run DBT and do all these complex stuff, you really don't need to do that. And you can get like really, really far just doing it that way. So let's take a look at how this would work with the sort of the architectural structure with GrowthBook. So GrowthBook is an open source A/B testing and feature flagging platform, and we are what we call warehouse native, a little bit like the Expo guys. We sit on top of your data warehouse. And then we have ways to do variation assignments and A/B testing and feature flagging on top of that. And the idea is that it's an A/B testing platform that you would build in-house without having to build it. It's entirely self-hostable. It's a Docker image. It's open source. And so kind of what it looks like is, you can pipe your data into your ClickHouse any way you like. We use Kafka and ClickPipes, but you can use your own, whatever you want to do there. And you can even pipe data from the edge. We do have a Cloudflare worker. I don't know if anyone's here for that. And so the idea is that like once you get your data into ClickHouse, then you just plug GrowthBook on top of that. We can go query that data for you. And then you can, although you don't have to, you can use GrowthBook to launch those tests as well. So we have SDKs that you can install everywhere and then be able to run that test. So the goal here is that like your ClickHouse is the center of your data analytics. And I probably don't need to tell you, but like there's a lot of tools that tie into that data, so you can create that central source of truth for all your analytics data. And that's really powerful, particularly if you ever see any weird data and you kind of want to figure out what's going on. you're kind of screwed with a lot of platforms that are just black boxes. So GrowthBook and a lot of other tools, like with ClickHouse, you can get that transparency into it. Cool, so let's jump into a quick demo. This is where I'm going to get kind of, so what I've done here is I have ClickHouse. Yes, it did not go to sleep. That's good. So this is a ClickHouse cloud that I just set up yesterday, and I dumped probably about a couple 100,000 records in here. So we have a couple tables like events, page views, and purchase and sessions. And what I'm going to show you is how easy it is to kind of query this from GrowthBook. So this is GrowthBook. This is the same product you get if you self-host it. It's an entire Docker container. So you can set up like an SDK configuration. So we'll go do that now. And we do support Cloudflare. Let's do an edge worker. And we can create that. And then so because we don't have anything, like there's nothing here. So if we hit this endpoint, we'll just get nothing. But we can start adding features to that. We can start adding A/B testing. We can use that as remote configuration and just start injecting into our code base. And then when you set up your SDK endpoint, you have to describe what we do with the exposure event. So there's an event that says this user saw an A/B test, and how do we serve that? So I'll show you what it looks like for like React, which is pretty common. So for React, there's this tracking callback here. And so this is where you would fire that one event that says this user saw an experiment and log that to ClickHouse. We do support event trackers out of the box like Segment. So we'll actually automatically do that, so you don't have to do anything there. So that's how you kind of do the assignment side if you don't already have that. But let's take a look at doing the data source side. So we're warehouse native. We sit on top of your data warehouse. So I'm going to choose ClickHouse. And I'm going to choose a custom event tracker because we made up this data. There we go. Thank you. Cool. So now we have ClickHouse set up. And so what we need to know now is like how do we identify a user? So we'll, by default, create a SQL query. But this isn't quite right because our data is a little bit different. So we're going to customize this. And so on the right here, we can see our ClickHouse data. So we have this experiment viewed table. So we're going to just pull from that. And then we would need to grab the user ID, but I'm going to do this by anonymous ID. So this is the randomization unit. You can actually use any identifier here you'd like. Did I spell that right?
Yeah. You have to change the experiment variation.
Thank you. Cool. And I'm going to actually add like browser here and country. So these are just dimensional columns here that we can add as well. Cool. So now we have basically a way to query, like get which users were exposed to which experiment. So now we need to find like what are the metrics we want to improve. So we're going to add a fact table here, and we're going to call this like events. And we're going to edit this. Is it events? Yes. Is that right? Do I have to value? Yeah.
No, it's just the event column.
Just the event?
Yeah, and value.
Cool. Sorry?
No, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, so basically we can kind of add all the different metrics here. I'm just going to add a few because I did this previously and I saved them here, so I don't have to bore you with writing SQL. I'll do the purchase one. Oh. Purchases. Okay, so now we have two kind of fact tables. So this is going to pull all the metrics out of the database for us. I'm just going to edit this because amount is actually not a string. It's a number. and it's actually a currency. So that'll kind of tell us, and what we do is we'll just quickly scan this table, and we actually will kind of recommend, hey, you you probably want to add like some of the metrics for you, so we'll add those automatically. And same with the other events, like here we can add, like page views. Actually, I didn't add that, did I? Anyway, so let's show you what that looks like. So under the experiments, I'm going to go add a new, or import an existing experiment. And we'll run this against ClickHouse. And because there's some data already in here, it detects automatically that there's some experiments that we can run. So we can import an experiment. It already detects the time zone. It knows it's a two-way test. We just then need to add some goal metrics like purchasing, and then we can run the experiment. So the cool thing is that this is doing row level, like event level access of your entire ClickHouse table, and we're doing it across a couple 100,000 here. Oh no. Okay, let me switch over to my backup then, because I know that okay, this is, yeah. So if you look, I can run this query and it will finish in a few seconds, assuming ClickHouse hasn't gone to sleep. Yeah, so it takes about 3 seconds. And it's querying 100,000 rows about 4 times, or 2, 3 times to get the results here. So this is our A/B testing platform. So you can see there's a column for the raw results, a column for the variation, and then the statistics there on the right. And then you can also break this down by like any dimension, like by browser and by country, or you can even do look at assignment. The other cool thing that GrowthBook does is like when you run a lot of experiments at scale, you kind of need to make sure your experiments are healthy, and so that can kind of go wrong. So this is our health tab where you can kind of see how the experiments were exposed over time and make sure that everything is running correctly. Cool. We also do like lots of bandits and everything else. Everything I've shown you so far is entirely open source. So literally the only cost you have is ClickHouse. Hopefully you'll pay us for some of the services, but like the majority of that is free. Cool. I'm not sure how I'm doing on time, but anyone have any questions?
So you said that like you use ClickPipes to get data from Kafka to like ClickHouse Cloud, right? Is this for like your cloud customers, or like is this for your open source customers as well? How does that work? So
yeah, so basically the default is GrowthBook is warehouse native. So we sit on top of whatever event data you have. We do have a hosted warehouse solution that is ClickPipes and that. We have thought about making that open source, but currently it's not. Yeah, we're still kind of thinking that. It's currently in beta, so if you're interested in trying it out, just let me know. But
did you ever consider other databases?
Other databases?
Yeah,
Besides ClickHouse. Yeah, it's like to support to sit on top of.
We do. We support most of them.
Oh.
Yeah.
Most of them.
It's not just ClickHouse. Like we had a data source. We support all of those.
Oh, I didn't see that part.
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's good. But you recommend ClickHouse?
I recommend doing it wherever your data is. If you haven't made a decision about where to put your data, I think ClickHouse is a great option. Yeah.
Nice.
A lot of companies already have, one of these.
Right. So makes sense. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. I think I have less of a database question, more of a product A/B testing question. I don't know whether you could talk to that, but I was curious, when you mentioned all those, large companies running, thousands, hundreds of thousands experiments, A/B experiments, real time kind of. I wonder whether you could talk to us a little bit about like how to make sure that experiment A does not influence experiment B. So you let's say have 10 different experiments running in parallel, right? And then the experiment A will drive certain metric up, but the other one will drive it down. So how do you make sense of that data?
Yeah, that's a pretty nuanced, or at least the answer is a little bit complicated, but the base is that like you can run what we call namespaces to kind of segment your audience and be able to run things entirely in isolation. Generally, however, people completely overestimate the level of interaction that will happen between experiments. So the interaction effects are quite common, but meaningful interaction effects are quite rare. Right? So will the effect actually change the outcome if they were run independently? And the answer is usually no. But you are sitting next to my head of data science. If you'd like a more nuanced question, you can get the answer there.
No, appreciate it. Thank you for the presentation.
Well, you say you support wherever data is, right? So if you're to make a bar chart of all these data sources among people who store their event data today, what will that bar chart look like?
It depends if it's like by volume or by
Volume.
volume. What do you think? It's probably Snowflake or BigQuery.
Snowflake and Databricks.
Databricks, yeah. We have some very, very large companies doing that.
You go by individual customers, like
BigQuery by a long way.
By a long shot, but they're often much smaller volume.
Is it because if you set up your app or whatever on Google Cloud, then you go default BigQuery?
Yeah, Google Analytics is very common.
Yeah.
So